Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set, cocked, and locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. And thank you for being in class today. We're going to be talking about farming. We might be talking about a currency collapse. We might be talking about solar activity. Dr. Richard Alan Miller and J.C. Cole are with us, as we said it would be last week. Welcome, Dr. Richard Alan Miller.
Hey, you know what? You have a quote. You have been and always will be my friend.
and likewise, Rick. Likewise. Thank you for being with us today. And, you know, I want to tell you, last night we had a few minutes to chat, and you were the most calm probably I have ever heard in our almost 10 years together.
Well, I got hit over the head with a lead pipe.
just once?
Oh, he's calm now. Look at it. Yeah. There, J.C. is also someone that Matt Stein and I talked with every day. Not talked with. I'm being trained how to choose my words better. J.C. is, I'd like to, when you bring him on, it would be my pleasure to get a little background on him, because his background is so unique that he, in some manners, helps me reflect better what I have to share.
Well, let's do that right now. And one of the things that I have on my list, and it was something that you mentioned, about JC, that, and I know this, he's been through a currency collapse or two or more.
Or
and
three.
He has, and he has firsthand experience of what that's like. And I know we're going to talk about farming, but one of the things that happened.
He was in the food collapse also. He saw what happened in Russia. He was there when it happened. And now, here we are.
Right. Right, and from my family's perspective, you know, the Finelli family, grandparents on both sides, gardens in the backyard. Why? Because they lived through the first Great Depression. Actually, our country's had a number of depressions and actual panics. And the president in 1929 of the United States decided that the term panic was just too extreme. So they softened it. Our government softened the term panic because people were literally jumping out of windows, killing themselves because of the economic crisis that was man-made in 1929. Well, the term depression was selected as something a little softer and more mild. Well, we are in the beginning of the second one, in my opinion, in the United States, and it really was called a panic. And food was in short supply. And one of the quotes that I wanted to share with our class, and I'd love to hear JC's take on this, is when I was a young boy, probably in the late 50s, early 1960s, I heard depression a lot. And it didn't mean someone was mentally depressed. It meant there was an economic collapse, if you will, in the United States. And so I asked my dad, so Dad, what did things cost in the Depression? And his answer was always the same. Vinny, it didn't matter what things cost. No one had any money. No one had any money. So it didn't matter whether it was 5 cents, $5, $50, $500, $5,000. You still couldn't afford it. JC, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Vincent.
How does that quote from my dad fit with what you have seen? J.C., as, in currency collapses?
Very accurate. What happens in when it's a collapse, meaning it drops down, people just don't have the spending capabilities. Products may be there, but they can't afford them.
So no matter what it costs, they can't get it without, obtaining it through normal channels, meaning pay for it. They might be able to steal it, but in terms of buying it, they couldn't do it. And
correct.
And he mentioned that, people were they'd buy a case of apples and they'd try to sell apples for a few cents a piece on the street corner. And these were people who might have previously, like yesterday, been a stockbroker, living quite well, having a very expensive automobile, which was a prized possession back then in the 1920s. Okay. So J.C., can you share with us, can you give us some blow-by-blow descriptions of what a currency collapse was like when you were there, and where were you?
Yes, I was in Latvia, which is right on the Russian border, and it was part of the Soviet Union and on the western side. And so what ended up happening was, just imagine the Soviet Union is 15 countries with an umbrella above it called let's just call it the Soviet Corporation. Like our country is 50 individual countries or states with the federal government umbrella over it. So during the Soviet period, the management system of the Soviet Union created the Soviet ruble. So when the collapse of the Soviet Union happened, it was like the corporation went bankrupt. Therefore, the entity that issued the currency no longer existed. It was almost like when Enron went bankrupt, the stock that was issued, the entity that issued it was no longer there. And so within a week, all of a sudden you had 300 million people that had a currency that had no backing, no issuer. And then you had 15 individual countries. So the West responded very quickly. And the first thing they did was get Russia, which was 2/3 of the Soviet Union in population, to back the Soviet ruble. So the Russians took the responsibility for backing it to keep that thing moving, in existence. And then all the other countries scrambled to create their new currency. So all of a sudden, you could buy things with rubles, but the ruble was starting to depreciate, or inflate, let's say, but very quickly. It was depreciating in value, and the prices of different things started to go up. And then so in Latvia, they actually came in with a temporary currency. I mean, they literally printed something that looked almost like monopoly money, but in the Latvian language. It was very, very simple currency, and it was called the Latvian ruble. So then we switched from using the old Soviet ruble to the Latvian ruble. It was a convergent currency. And then that gave them time to a few years to create the official currency, which would go back to the 1930s currency of Latvia called the Latvian lat. And so I came in right when the Soviet ruble was going out, and the Latvian ruble was coming in, and the prices were in the thousands on items. And they got to the point where the price of the Soviet ruble was dropping so fast that they didn't even price the food anymore. They priced it in a hard currency, which would either be the Deutschmark or the dollar. And then they had the conversion at the front desk, where, today it was $1 equals, 5,000 Soviet rubles. And then it would go maybe $1 equals, tomorrow it was $1 equals 7,000 Soviet rubles. And so the Soviet ruble over those 2 years, I think it was, devalued, like by 50,000 to 1, if you calculate it out. And of course, the people in Russia, the average Russian people, were still being paid in Soviet rubles. And it was devaluating at that rate. So the object was to get rid of it as fast as you got it. You got paid. And of course that created massive confusion because nobody had been through that. They didn't really know what to do. And of course you're worried about just being able to afford food. So that's what happens when it's collapsing.
In Germany, there was something similar that happened.
Yes.
In terms of hyperinflation. And there was a currency called Notgeld, Notgeld, which I believe means not gold. And it looked like carnival money or carnival currency or carnival tickets. And it was small, like monopoly money. And it was used by local villages for commerce. And so something similar happened there. And when you talked about you want to get rid of it before you held on to it too long, that's what happened in Germany, because during this period of hyperinflation, we're talking like the 1920s, that era, if you went to a restaurant, you would want to pay for your food before you ate it, because if it took you 45 minutes to eat it, it would cost more by the end of the meal than it did at the beginning when you first sat down. And that's hyperinflation. And we learned that, it would take a wheelbarrow full of money or currency, paper currency, if you want to call it that, or call it money, but in currency, to buy a loaf of bread. But the story goes that if you actually had a wheelbarrow, you could buy a city block with the wheelbarrow. So we haven't experienced that in this country. No. We've never seen, in our lives, right?
Right. One of the areas to study on say, a financial collapse is Argentina. And there was a writer out there named Fairfowl who wrote a book on it, the economic collapse of Argentina. And he was a 19-year-old kid that is going through all this. And so he documented it. And that the Argentinian peso, I think it's a peso, dropped so fast, and then what happened, how the stores closed and then markets kind of popped up and the whole evolution of getting back to another currency that was working. It's a fascinating read.
When we come back,
we're
going into a break. Let's talk a little bit more about this when we come back, and I'll tell you what I've seen in prices here in the United States for quality used items. Dr. Richard Alan Miller's with us. J.C. Cole's with us, and we're talking about currency collapse, and we'll be talking about farming in a little bit.
Wait, I have input.
Go ahead.
Okay, I have an input.
Sure.
I want to get people to remember Grapes of Wrath and the long drive, metaphorically, from Oklahoma to California. And that long drive symbolized what was the way the United States felt what J.C. Cole's talking about. Grapes of Wrath.
Do you want to share with us exactly what you mean?
Well, the idea that you couldn't make it here and you went west in a wagon train seeking a new life. Steinbeck and some of the other writers during that period captured those images so well. As a child, I remember the feeling of why Grace Thorne is my friend. One of the things is she came from Oklahoma. You know, the idea that there was nothing happening there and they had to go somewhere else to be able to survive.
Right. That's what's happening. There's an exodus from California right now and exodus from New York City right now.
And
just to survive.
All cities. Yes, all big cities are now starting to defend.
This also happened in Latvia, where when the Soviet Union collapsed, there were 2.4 million people in Latvia, and now it's about 1.9 million. So they've lost about 500,000 that pretty much immigrated to other European countries for the pay scale.
Exactly. Thank you.
A lot into Ireland, England, and some of the other areas, because they can do much better, and then, send a good amount of money home to the parents.
So I'm looking at the internet right now, and here's something I've been telling our class, that quality items are going up in price dramatically. And let me give you an example. So back in the 70s, I used to be able to buy a brand new battery charger, an automotive 12-volt battery charger, for about $15, literally. That same battery charger today that I could have bought in the 70s is used for sale on eBay for $70, 70. What I'm saying is, if you want Chinese junk, you can still get it, and it's only a little bit more expensive than it was in the good old days. I'm talking about, December. Just a little bit more expensive. But if you want a quality U.S. manufactured item, an automotive tool, an automotive battery charger made by, a quality company with quality ingredients, it's going to cost between 2 and 4x what it cost before, which is an enormous increase. So what's happening, I see, as a couple things. One, people have realized that the Chinese products don't last very long, and they'd rather have something that is 50 years old, made in the United States, than something brand new that's made in China in terms of tools. Another example, Harbor Freight sockets. They have these really neat idea. Color coding sockets. So you can get, the red one is a different size from the blue one, which is a different size from the silver one, which is a different size from the yellow and the green. What a great way to identify sockets. But if you buy them, you pay extra for that. They're made in China. And then soon the color wears off. And they go back to the chrome look that they used to be before they colored them. So what I'm saying is that and then the plating chips off some of these Asian products, like sockets. Now, who wants a socket that you're going to slice your fingers on with the plating that is coming off? Well, that doesn't happen. It's never happened with an American brand socket. Not in my entire lifetime. I'm talking about SK Wayne, Husky, SK, Craftsman, Proto, Blackhawk. None of those have ever had these problems. So what we're seeing is that people have realized what quality is, and they're willing to pay a lot more for it, which I think is an example of the inflation. And I'd love to hear JC's take when we come back on where we are headed in the United States, with all of these little pieces of anecdotal evidence of us going down the drain. Dr. Richard Alan Miller's with us, richardallenmiller.com. JC Cole's with us. JC, quick question. Where are we headed in the United States based on your experience with currency collapses, the stock market, farming, etc.? Putting all that together, where are we headed?
Politely, for a very large paradigm shift that will be painful. I don't like using, words that have emotional trips like collapse or something. But if we actually look at the currency issues, the Federal Reserve has never been audited, so we don't know how much is out there. And another thing for Americans that we don't really grasp is our currency is also the world reserve currency at this time. So a good part of the world also uses the U.S. dollar. So if that part stops happening, where do all those dollars that the rest of the world have, where do they go? And they come back here and create a hyperinflation. So it looks like the entire Western financial system somehow has to metamorphose or get rebooted. And that's one. The thing that pushed me into farming, I was in real estate development. I really enjoyed it, and I did quite well at it. But I came back and I started farming, and is that in our system now, we have basically an economics of scale farming system, and is controlled by food processing is controlled by 10 mega corporations. We import in 50% of our food, and the other 50% of which we grow is grown, 80% of that's grown west of the Mississippi, where you are, and farther west. So it's delivered with a very sophisticated just-in-time delivery system. You know, if I asked, we could ship cows, beef here in 3 days. And what that means for us in New York, or the New York region, is the food is 2,000 miles away. When in history has that ever been? If you look at the history, at least the history we're allowed to see, never. And if you look at what happened with Napoleon, he used the theory to, capture the enemy's food supply and move very quickly, and he got all the way into Moscow. And the Tsar refused to capitulate and burnt all the food around Moscow, and just let Napoleon experience the winter. And that's how he got defeated in Russia. So we're sitting here looking, though, if New Jersey, being the most densely populated state, is about 1,200 people per square mile. To give an idea, last time I checked, it was Montana was 8 people per square mile. So in New Jersey, we are not self-sufficient. If shipping gets cut off, we probably have about 2 weeks of food, I would guess. So we are, our the balance is so out of whack just because of our just-in-time shipping. And so we have that with a financial issue and with a stock market that doesn't make any sense. The stock market is so high that all of the old variables that they would monitor are totally gone. And so we're having a convergence. If we look at it from the physical side, we're having a convergence of different cycles and waves, and they all seem to be hitting at the same time. And now you actually can look up certain information to verify it. One is, let's say, the fourth turning, which is like an 80-year cycle. And another one is the solar cycle, which is an 11-year cycle on top of about a 400-year cycle. Well, it looks like the 400-year cycle is coming into a minimum. And you start to add up all those cycles, and they're all coming at the same time. And if you follow Martin Armstrong's work, he basically says the same thing. All of these cycles are converging almost like the same time of the 1750s, when there was the French Revolution and the American Revolution. And then you just do some research and you find the evidence that seems to be true. So it's a question of how do you do we crash and burn, or do we just have a hard landing? And so how do you prepare for that? And of course, Vincent, that's what you've been pushing on for all these years, is one of the ways is to make sure that you have sustainable farming within a certain percentage of sustainable farming around each population center.
I could add up in Vancouver, BC, which is now the seat for spice trade, not Hamburg. Since recorded history, the country that controlled world trade always controlled the spice trade. Now, what is spice? As a commodity, they are basically called non-storable commodities. They're broken down into storable and non-storable commodities. And agribusiness was always based on storable commodities: wheat, your different grains, soybean, corn, wheat, other things like that. And then the non-storable ones were the ones that you did not want to create shortages or surpluses, because the markets would soar on a given product, like peppermint leaf. You wouldn't want to produce too much peppermint, because then there was, it would go to waste. Had to be used up that year. And so individual states created what are called market orders, where they limited the amount of production in that particular state on that particular non-storable commodity. These are what we today call alternative agriculture. And that was basically the role of small family farm, was to produce their corn and their wheat that they would use for their personal consumption, but then have a series of crops they could barter and negotiate other things that they needed, leather, whatever. And back then, things were sold in two forms or categories. There was cheapest, Best Buy. And Best Buy is per dollar spent. You got more for bang for your buck than if you bought cheapest. And there were always cheapest supplies. That would have been China. And then there was Best Buy, which was American agriculture. American agriculture was what made America so strong, was that it had small family farm. And that's why, as a physicist, I went into agriculture. Visionary? I don't know. What I do know is that I am so far more happy sitting up on top of a mountain, wildcrafting. I was on tour yesterday from Clackamas College. I'm right now on vacation, a 6-day period up in the high desert region of Oregon, near Bend, Oregon. And there's a museum up here that's unbelievable. It's called the High Desert Museum. Possibly one of the nicest museums in the United States, including the Smithsonian, because this has a small family farm in the 1880s. It shows the blacksmith shop, shows the woodworking shop, it shows the sawmill, it shows the various little things that formed a small given community. And the reason I mentioned the seat of spice trade in Vancouver is because what happened after when Hong Kong closed, the seat of spice trade went to Vancouver, BC. Vancouver then became 7 times larger than Seattle. And what that is, basically a bunch of Punjabi from India moved into Vancouver, BC, in the outlying region, supply everything to Vancouver. Vancouver's sovereign. They tried growing ginseng up there, and they had groundnut, and it didn't work well. And you still get that from Tennessee and Kentucky. But your ginseng, your best ginseng. There was one farm I set up in Missouri, Ohio. has 1,500 acres of wild ginseng growing in a forest using terraces coming down on the water. And that farm is now setting up Chinese standard for money because ginseng is still used as their primary measuring block, not gold. Now, ginseng has always been an important commodity like gold and steel. And, I don't know, what's the echinaceas, different forms of those kinds of crops. Germany came in the 30s trying to take over the echinacea crop, and they brought the wrong one back to Europe. It's called Echinacea purpurea, or purple coneflower. That turns out to now be a Rudbeckia. It's not a real true echinacea, because echinacea sides have things that change the flora in your mouth and stop infection. Less than nothing. You can, just chewing on an echinacea root, get rid of coronavirus. Bang, just like that. And so everybody knows that.
Yeah, Dr. Graham, what you pointed out is that, again, we're getting these economic of scale in certain regions. And that's pretty much all controlled by this incredible shipping system we have. But I have a microcosm.
You're right.
Yeah, I have a microcosm that shows the difficulties that we're looking at. When I came back and I, listening to some of the good commentators out there, they pointed out that one of the food shortages that you have in a war zone, the fastest one to appear is animal protein. So if you look at animal protein, the easiest and the most complete and the fastest to grow is basically a chicken egg. So I focused on chickens, and I said, okay, so where do I get the chickens? Well, so they come from a niche market hatcheries. One is in Quakertown, Pennsylvania, which is about an hour away. Another one,
Lancaster, yeah.
Yeah. Another one is a break.
We're going into a break, and we'll come back with Dr. Richard Alan Miller and J.C. Cole. I've got a couple comments about the chicken eggs and the distance to travel to truck food and the population density of New Jersey. We'll have a few exclamation points to add to what J.C. and Rick have been talking about. So, J.C., I believe you mentioned that New Jersey has the highest population density in the United States, about 1,200 people per square mile. And to put that in perspective, class, that would mean that 400 people would live on our farm if we were in New Jersey. 400 people would live on our farm. That's unimaginable to me. I wouldn't like it either. So, the next thing I'd like to mention is you talked about the distance of transporting food, and of course that's done mostly by truck and 18-wheeler type trucks, and that was done because of cheap fuel. There's a book written by a gentleman by the name of James Howard Kunstler, and the book was called The Long Emergency. And what happened was the price of fuel was so low during the peak output of fuel, I'm talking about oil, that people who used to work in the cities and live in the cities would say, the heck with this. I can get more land in the suburbs and drive to work because it doesn't cost that much for fuel. 9 cents a gallon, 10 cents a gallon, 15 cents a gallon, literally. So people moved to the suburbs and then a little farther out and a little farther out. And the cheap fuel is why people don't live in cities as they used to, because they used to work at the factory and live near the factory and either walk to work or take the bus or the train. Okay. Next thing, you mentioned food shortages in a war zone, and the first thing to go is protein. That's absolutely correct. Now, in your neck of the woods, J.C., in the Garden State, and believe it or not, class, the Garden State wasn't always paved over. There are really beautiful, beautiful spots in New Jersey. Absolutely magnificent. And the soil is second to none. So in the southern half of the state, there's some absolutely magnificent farms, world-class farms, horse farms. Anyway, there's a county in New Jersey which is one of the largest. It's called Ocean County. Now, I know for a fact that maybe 30 years ago, if you were driving through Ocean County, you would see these white, long buildings, and they're made out of wood. And they're probably pretty dilapidated by now. But during World War II, people who owned land in Ocean County, New Jersey, would raise chickens. And they built these this was the beginning of factory farming for eggs. Because we needed a lot of eggs, powdered eggs, to send over to our guys in Europe and in the Pacific. So to feed our guys protein, we built chicken farms, and a whole bunch of them are in Ocean County, New Jersey, and you might even still be able to see some. J.C., do you know what I'm talking about?
I do. Actually, our farm, which is in Somerset County, just north of Princeton, has a very interesting story related to all of everything we're talking about, but has a foundation on it from a chicken house. It was a mixture of a dairy farm and a chicken farm. And so many of my neighbors that were farms still have the chicken house. They just don't have the chickens. And that one of the largest manufacturers of chicken machinery is in Flemington, New Jersey, where they were chicken raisers, and they realized they'd make more money making the products to support it, the grain feeders, the incubators, and things like that. So yeah, and what ended up happening is that we started, over the last 50 years, you started competing with economics of scale, where these guys would put up, someplace like there's one in North Carolina that has 5 million birds all under one roof.
Let me add right now. That's why in Carlisle and Lancaster, the Amish excommunicated the bishop. He did outreach to me in Kansas City. They hired me to do a business plan for the Amish using Mozart music to create a low cholesterol egg that is now still being marketed along the eastern seaboard by the Amish. And what really happened was when Osaka decided that they have 3 feedlots in Osaka that are 60 stories high, where the cattle never see the light of day, trying to produce protein for Japan. And what I did for that one, by the way, I also said Lancaster one personally, which is the low cholesterol reduced to omega-3. I'll tell you about Osaka after this commercial.
Yeah, going into the top of the hour break, news, commercial announcements. Dr. Richard Alan Miller is with us, J.C. Cole's with us, and you're learning a little bit about history. I have a solution
on protein.
Yeah, there you go. And we'll teach you about farming when we come back. Everyone all set? Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Dr. Richard Alan Miller's with us, J.C. Cole's with us. And so we've got the country covered. Rick's on the left, J.C.'s on the right, and I'm in the middle. I'm talking geographically. And I mentioned the book, The Long Emergency, James Howard Kunstler. It's available on eBay. You can just go to eBay, search The Long Emergency, 3 words. It's available for the lowest price of $3.99 shipped. I just bought another copy to share with those close to us. Rick, do you see a food emergency coming? Before you get into Osaka, do you see a food emergency coming?
Because of Dorito corn chips, yes. Because of eating properly, well, processed foods. You see, what happened in Osaka was that the cattle never saw the light of day. And as a result, they were diseased and rampant with all kinds of problems. And what I discovered was that when you take alfalfa, which is the primary cattle feed that most Americans feed their cattle, plus whatever grasses and other things are out there that they can nibble on, the cattle produce a protein. I discovered that comfrey, when mixed with alfalfa, on a 60% comfrey, 40% alfalfa pellet or cube, had lysine and allantoin, the two missing amino acids in most cattle foods that allowed the cow to have an immune system that completely overcame Osaka. But the problem was, how do you handle comfrey? Because it has a taproot that goes down 18 feet. And when you take the top green part off, which is where all your protein is located, it has a mucilage that causes comfrey to rot. And so how to handle it. And that was the problem and then goal that I had. How do you easily handle comfrey to then mix it with alfalfa? See, when it's alfalfa, you cut green chop or green cut alfalfa on a green chop, you can run it right through a cuber or a pelletizer, and it comes out perfect. That's the primary exports out of Washington State now, with James Farrell and R. Miller, not me, different Miller, that send to Japan some of the primary exports out of the state of Washington that feed cattle all through the world. And just by mixing comfrey in that cattle food made the protein resource of cattle, like chickens, playing Mozart music, feeding them non-oceanic form of omega-3. Just doing that alone, playing Mozart music, created a low cholesterol egg, which is now dominating the eastern seaboard out of Lancaster and Carlisle because of Mozart music, purslane, which comes, by the way, off the Fort McDowell River. Now, using comfrey, which grows everywhere, New Jersey, anywhere, the problem is how do you handle it? And what I discovered is I did a field lay, I did a sidebar cutter, laid it in the field for a one-day wilt. Then I picked it up, dried it in hop kilns, 60% dry. And then I could run it right through a cattle pelletizer, and it took me approximately a year of learning how to handle comfrey using vacuum cleaners off your harrow bed pickups and things of that nature, where you throw it back into the wagon as a semi-dried crop, straight off to a hop kiln. Plywood mills have hop kilns. That's what I used, the old plywood mills. Weren't no longer using timber, and I just dehydrated it that way, and then I could mix it with that. And James Farrell, there's some other larger ones out of Iowa that do cattle feeds across the world that buying that, I think, megaton. Now, everybody can grow comfrey. And when you do that, you feed that with your normal grains that you would feed to a cow. And now you have a protein source that's way more efficient than rangeland cattle going through forests, which is what they do now. And
Rick, I had a quick question for you. I have a quick question for you. Could you have used a tedder? And what we do when we think we don't have enough time to lay the grass, after we cut the grass and lay it down in the field and let the grass dry with the sun, we will use another machine. So first we cut it, and then it lays down in rows.
You want to crimp it. You want to put a light crimp on it.
Well, we don't have
the leaf so it dries faster.
Well, we don't have one of those. But what we do have,
you can put it on your sidebar cutter as a little tiny piece of a rod that, as it's being cut, and it goes across that rod, it causes it to break.
Right, but
when you
we don't do that, and maybe it's because I
know
think
you don't do that. If you did that, you wouldn't have to do your process now. But you can do your process now. I'm just saying there are some techniques as a physicist, simple stuff.
Well, Ted, okay, that crimper literally shatters the stem, and the liquid inside the grass leaks out. So that's what that's all about. It's kind of like putting it through a rolling press.
Yeah, you make it dry faster.
Yeah, and that's the idea, to get it to dry faster. What we do is we use a tedder. So first we cut it, then the next thing, if we don't have...
the ones that are classically used, yeah.
Yeah, this tedder is like an egg beater, class, except it doesn't have rounded edges. It has just tines. And as we go by, it's 13 feet wide, it just grabs the grass that's been cut and laid on the ground. It throws it up in the air. And when it comes down...
Or you can use a sidebar delivery rake, and you can rake it and just turn your pile over twice.
Right.
That in itself will do the same thing as throwing it in the air.
Well, the reason we throw it up in the air with this tedder is so that it comes down in a random pattern, or randomly, and it's like pickup sticks landing in all different directions if you drop them, and then the air can get under it, the sunlight can get under it better, and it dries faster.
Well,
so
you're returning or re-exposing the surface to different air and light.
Right.
The problem is it's going to rain tomorrow. What are you going to do? It's going to rain tomorrow.
That's why we do this. That's why we do it, because we know it's going to rain tomorrow. But the question I have for you is, would this work with comfrey rather than using, energy?
No.
Okay.
Comfrey has 32% protein.
Mm-hmm. That's enormous.
2%. Okay. 32% comfrey. Pure protein and amino acids.
That's real high.
Right out of okay. That mucilage will not dry normal standard form. You need air across it like a blower. And so what you did is, if you put it up to 4 feet and you then had big fans blowing up through it, it would cause it take that moisture from the next to the root or next to the plant, move it out to God. And what you're trying to do is take that moisture as quickly as possible. Now, the second way you can do that is by changing partial pressure. Your exchange ratio is different. That means that in your shed, you're pulling a partial pressure with squirrel cage fans up on top so that the plastic goes concave inward. That means the partial pressure inside is different than outside. And just by changing that by 1/2 changes the exchange ratio by 2 orders of magnitude, 2 zeros. It dries 100 times faster just by pulling partial pressure on the product.
Yeah, what you're talking about is applying vacuum. J.C.
There you go. Right in the field, you can tumble it as it's going through the wind tunnel. And you have squirrel cage fans on it, and you're blowing it out the back end, and just that alone causes the product to dry faster. And when you mix that comfrey with alfalfa, your cattle will never, ever get sick no matter what you do to it. They're not even exposed to ambient inside 60-story feedlots.
Well, those 60-story feedlots are insanity to me.
That's in Osaka. They have 3 of those right now. And they didn't know what to do. And I solved that problem in 1 year. And that's the physics in agriculture, not agriculture and agronomy, physics in agriculture. Once you combine those two things, now problems that have faced alternative agriculture in the diversity of uniquenesses in different roots, grasses, seed, whatever, that becomes a whole new thing. There's things that could be grown up in your region now, like psyllium. Psyllium is plantain and the covering that holds that seed pod. And that's what psyllium is. Imagine what that does for your gut. That's why
it's Metamucil. It's Metamucil without the sugar.
Yeah, that's one brand. Yeah, now you're getting the big picture. That Roto-Rooter's view in a level that nothing else in the world does. When you realize that you have now plantain, a bunch of little plantain, you want to do the long steam stem, there's different varieties. What happens is if you try to go in with a combine, it shatters, and you lose 50% of your product. How do you get it off the field without the shatter? And that's what I saw up in North Dakota. And that's where they're farming it now, not down in Texas anymore. And I'm trying to use some metaphor here, as a metaphor. Non-storable commodities. American agriculture focuses on those rather than agribusiness. It's covered. It's not about money. It's about products, pharmaceuticals. You can't get anywhere else. Everything used to be from natural sources. What they're doing now is synthesizing. And the difference in valerian root or Valium or Valerine sulfate, to be more precise, off the Great Lakes region, is different than what they're synthesizing as Valerine sulfate in a laboratory. Metabolizes differently. Doesn't act as a smooth muscle relaxer. That's what Valium is. It's not a sedative. It's a smooth muscle, just like feverfew is. And that's what I did for 15 years after I left military. Now I have a 9-volume encyclopedia on alternative agriculture. That is a bottom line. Small farm agriculture across North America, because each region has its own Me Too crop. Me Too crops, like when India grows psyllium, nobody else can compete with them. China grows da-da-da. Nobody can compete with them. The United States, 8 bioregions, which means we can grow everything.
When we come back after this break coming up, J.C., would you tell us your thoughts on, is there a food shortage that is imminent, and what do we do about it if you think there is a food shortage coming our way, or supply chain crack that will affect a lot of people? What do we do if you believe that that's coming our way? Are we facing a food emergency in your opinion?
In my opinion, definitely.
Okay, what do we do about it? I'm talking about, the people who are listening to our broadcast class, those who are paying attention, those who are willing to respond to the call of action. What do we do?
I think Matt Stein had said it best. First, you focus on solving it for your family, then your community, then your nation. And so for your family, that's all about prepping and getting into storage of food and production of food, the balance and the equipment and everything needed. And now, you can start to influence, your community, to start investing. But the big picture is very, very simply, we need a stunning amount of small, sustainable farms.
There you go. That's the bottom line.
The country.
Yes, sir.
And the only way I've figured out how to do that is to get a tax advantage from the U.S. government.
There's another way.
That
if you can barter, you start the way I taught children. You start with your herbal pharmacy. That's pharmaceutical medicine. If you've got that to barter, your neighbor's got some tomatoes that you didn't grow.
I agree with you, Rick, but it's not fast enough to duplicate. In other words, you can do it kind of locally, but
yes, that's what you do. You
that will take years.
Yeah, that's what Chattanooga did. When I did 7 workshops there, and at the end of the day, Chattanooga was then producing. Every single restaurant had its own greenhouse on the Chattanooga River. The center of town, which was the business district, converted into a farmer's market. They have a stock exchange that now, each week, they have surplus food that didn't sell that week that is perishable. And Chattanooga today, their logo is right here, right now. And that means that they're producing 40% of the food that's consumed in that city. And in New Jersey,
let me share with you.
Right now, what they're doing is at the top of every single skyscraper, they have a hydroponic or some kind of farming system using the light on the top of a skyscraper feeds the cafeteria in that building. If you do that alone, watch what happens next with Victory Gardens.
Okay, here's what's happening in my neck of the woods, our neck of the woods here in Missouri. A couple of years ago, up until a few months ago, there were for sale signs on all kinds of farms. Now, typical farm around here might be 200 acres, something like that. That'd be typical. And a lot of these farmers plant cows, and that's what they do. Put some fences up, and you could buy one. And they were very reasonably priced until a couple weeks ago. Now there are none left. And I rang the alarm. I called a few people. I said, you can still buy one here. I'll help you. It's gone. There are no farms available for sale that I know of because all the signs are gone. New fences are being put up. People are moving in from I don't know where because they have followed J.C.'s model. First, the one you talked about with Matt Stein. First, the family, then the village, then the nation. So they are zeroed in on one thing and one thing only right now, and that is the family. And that's what we zeroed in on back in 1989 when I decided that there's enough of working for a living and having a job, and we were going to become farmers. So that's when we became farmers, about 40 years ago. And we were learning how to do it. So we got a jump start on those who are trying to do it today. You can still do it, but time is running out. And the long-range plan, that's wonderful. But you got to do it right now and survive now. We'll be right back. So, class, let me give you some real numbers. When this panic started, around January, the Corona panic, I decided that we were going to ramp up with our chickens. And why? Because J.C. hit the nail right on the head. When you're in a war zone, protein is first thing to go. And what's the easiest protein to raise? As J.C. said, it's chickens. Well, maybe it's bugs, but I'm not eating bugs. So, well, roaches, you don't even have to work to raise roaches, right?
That's why you have chickens. They
right.
eat the roaches.
And the ticks and the fleas and grasshoppers. Chickens are eating machines, and they will be on patrol as long as they're awake. They're on patrol, and they wake up before you wake up. Believe me, I know. We have an alarm. Actually, have 2 alarms that go off every day around 4:30 in the morning to tell us it's time to get up. Well, we're outside.
Actually have 30.
Mm-hmm.
I
you have 30 chickens?
have 30. No, 30 roosters.
Good for you. Good for you. That's 15 times more.
That's a whole nother show.
Yeah, I know. Another show.
All right. So pursuing the chicken issue, here's what we did here at the farm. Immediately we bought chickens. Now we could have bought chicks, but instead of buying chicks for $2.50 a piece and raising them in the house, we bought almost ready to lay eggs, Rhode Island Reds, $7 each. So we bought 14 of them, and that was just under $100. They were ready to go. And what did we do? We put them in a 10-foot by 10-foot dog pen. There's a chain link pen that is normally used for putting your dogs in and putting them in prison. Well, we put the chickens in them for their own safety, and we left them in there for about a couple weeks till they got used to where they lived, which is our farm. And then we started letting them out. Now, that 10 by 10 dog pen, you can get one for about $200 with a walk-through gate, 10 feet by 10 feet, 6 feet high. And you need to put a roof on it. And so we have some tarps that we put over that. So that was $200 for the dog pen, $98 for the chickens. A bag of chicken feed is about $10, and that's 50 pounds. And you're going to have to buy that, ongoing. And then you need a waterer and you need a feeder trough. And so for about $400, you can be in the chicken business as we are with 14 chickens. 2 of them happen to be roosters. So we can make more chickens if we want to. And we get roughly 10 eggs a day. Now, 10 eggs a day, that's more than we can eat. So we give them to our neighbors. And we're always giving we don't ask anything for them. We just say, let me know when you get down to a dozen eggs and we'll fill you up again. I mean, literally, I'm not kidding. That's what we do. So we drop them off. We'll get in our truck and we'll call the neighbors and say, we're coming your way and we're going to leave them at your gate. And that's what we do, literally. Now, the most important and precious thing we have are those darn chicken egg cartons, because they're 50 cents a piece, which is an enormous percentage of the cost of eggs, right? 50 cents for the empty carton. So we reuse them. So as long as they keep their cartons good, they'll get more eggs. So that's where we are. And J.C., is that step number one?
I have a couple of very important points there. Okay. The first is what I believe one of the most important pieces of equipment for preppers after they get past, water purification and fire and whatnot, is a chicken egg incubator. Right? So I've actually done this. And this leads back into Ocean City and New Jersey being the Garden State. But so what I would recommend is that there's one incubator that's available that I found. I haven't used it myself, but because I already had a lesser brand. But it runs on 12 volt and 110. And it incubates about 25 chicken eggs, and that you can hatch your own as long as you have fertilized eggs. So that gives anybody the ability to expand the food supply by hatching them. And I found it on incubatorwarehouse.com. Is where you find some great equipment. That's one. The second one is, if we look and we know we have a food crisis coming. We don't know how fast it's going to come, but we have to plan for that second paradigm. So in today's world, let's call it paradigm 1, you raise beef. The ability for the herd to expand is linear. You get maybe one calf per year per cow. But if we also plan another part of our farming on certain species that exponentially grow, one of them is chickens. So if you have those chickens and you can incubate 25 eggs a month, right? Just think about that. 25 month 1, 25 month 2, 25 month 3. You can exponentially grow it. And so for many of our sustainable farms, we need to have a certain balance with those species that can exponentially grow the protein supply. And a couple of people have identified those. So there's one is chicken. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, one's chickens, one's ducks, one's rabbits, one is
worm case.
Nigerian.
Those three alone.
Nigerian dwarf goats, and the other one is pigs. All of them.
So what I wanted to add in fine tuning is, someone dumped a bunch of fighting cocks off at my dead end street, and I watched the herd of roosters diminish because of predators, osprey, eagle, the peregrine falcon, etc. And what the Anaconda and the Americana rooster did which is different than any other rooster. They do the blue egg. If they scent one of their buddies up 40 feet in a tree, that's what anaconda do. And they set up a perimeter so that you don't have predator diminishing your flock. Page 2. There was a second thing we could do. And that was to, well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm trying to make some really important points. There are certain kinds of genuses and species that you want to focus on because from a habitat point of view, they're more suited. And while...
Agreed.
Okay. Now, and each habitat is different. And so you have to focus on what your crops are that make you uniquely different than your neighbor down the street. And that's what the Punjabi did up in Vancouver, BC. And Vancouver, BC is a lockdown city. They can survive now. Anything that's going to happen. Not Chattanooga, it's at 40%, because the Punjabi do everything in the alternative thing. And they don't even concern themselves with Me Too crops, or what we call storable commodities. That comes from outside in shipping. What they focus on are the non-storable pharmaceuticals, and food items give you your health. Because
so Vincent,
corn.
Let me touch.
Yeah.
Let me touch back on Ocean City. As we pointed out, New Jersey had a huge production of chickens, and especially during World War II. So all of a sudden I realized the control of the incubator is crucially important. And I searched Craigslist and I found 4, I would call them antique incubators back from the 1940s that still work, right? That were put in 1942. I have the original sale document for it. And that I can incubate up to about 2,000 eggs a month. So that I can, and what I did was I bought an old travel trailer that had very little value. It was no longer needed for humans to go camping. And I put the incubators in them. So I'm getting those to work so I can be able to go to any farm, any of my neighbor's farm with the incubator, because honestly, I don't need more than 2,000 birds myself, right? And we could just incubate at all the local farms. That's building the community. And it cost me less than $1,000 to do it.
Well, I'm looking at Craigslist right now, and yes, they are available. I see them right here, right now.
The Buckeye, and the which was obviously made in Ohio, and the Marathon, which was made in Brunswick, New Jersey. Mm-hmm. Right. So, and then the other thing I'll tell you about, I'll send you a breakdown of it, was I figured out how to take a travel trailer and turn it into a chicken coop that I can pull with the tractor to any location on the farm for fresh green grass. And I put up an electric fence. Depends on which predators you have, but I put up an electric fence around it, and it cost me less than any other housing. And very interesting, what shocked me was, because it's a travel trailer, it's already insulated. So you don't have to worry about extreme heat or extreme cold. So I have this all typed up. Okay. And we'll send it in to you.
Well, that would be great.
Most important point I wanted to make was, when I first came out of grad school, my first job at Boeing was Lunar Base Alpha 1. I was the physicist in charge of light. And we had a closed system. That means you don't have a neighbor. Don't have a earth pile. You have to have all the essential inorganic salts available in a reproductive system that is a closed system going from here to Alpha Centauri. How do you do that? And we discovered 1/3 chicken manure, 1/3 rabbit manure, and 1/3 worm casing with a closed system for inorganic salt. You have your chickens and you're doing your rabbits, your protein stores, your worm cages, or what's set up mycorrhizae soil. Those three mixed in a tumble, how you feed your plants. Now, don't get sick because they have all inorganic salt closed system. Your single farm.
So what we've learned so far is to get a jump start on this, it's chickens. Chickens are going to be the easiest way to go. We'll be right back. Rick's with us. JC's with us. Rick's website is richardalanmiller.com. Richard, A-L-A-N, Miller, M-I-L-L-E-R.com. JC, you mentioned this travel trailer. And what you were mentioning, without going into depth, is that, without saying it, chickens eat grass. They literally eat grass. And as they eat grass, they poop. They fertilize the field while they're eating the grass. So grass is one of the food staples that chickens need to have. And it works out really, really well. So if you were to be able to move where the chickens are every day, you would have your field somewhat fertilized, or your grass is somewhat fertilized. Now, what we do is, some people make what they call a chicken tractor. What that is it's a wheeled device. The chickens are inside, and you move this either with a little tractor, or you have like a fence that has two wheels on it. You pick it up and you kind of roll it to the next spot where the chickens haven't been, today, and they get fresh grass. And they eat fresh bugs that are there. What we do is a little different. We have some dogs that protect the chickens, and we let the chickens run loose. And then at night, when they know it's bedtime, I just call them. I call the chickens, and they come running. They go, oh, it's time to go to bed. And they run into their 10-foot by 10-foot dog pen. And they sit on the roost. And in that dog pen is a hen nest. And there are multiple little compartments. And each one will hop into the perch, go into the hen nest, lay their egg, and then go look for more food. And that's what they do.
Let me interject one point here. You want to see your chicken run, you can get your free food from breweries. After they've brewed the beer, they have barrels of spent grain that they have to pay to get rid of. They will give you that grain for free. And if you want to see a chicken run and be healthy, go to your local brewery and get the spent grain. And as a courtesy, give them a couple of old layer hens that are no longer any good for frying. Watch what happens next.
Well, in our neck of the woods, that would be, I'd be saying this bud is for you, because St. Louis would be.
That's the way we call it back east.
Yeah.
This bud,
yeah.
No,
JC,
that's not marijuana bud either. Listen, that's the truth of it.
No, I'm talking about Budweiser.
Yes, I know.
St. Louis.
Instead of marijuana. Yeah. And by the way,
St. Louis,
you want to make a living, it's not hemp as CBDs and medical. It's hemp as a virgin white paper, because that's the future. And you think the markets now, and all these people in New Jersey and Missouri putting in all this CBD and thing, think that's big time. It's nothing. Our virgin white paper, 15 feet a year, copper thing. That's my input for this day.
JC, what are your thoughts about chickens as a good jumping off point for food security for the family?
Excellent. It's a protein security, and also they're very easy to manage. Just a few of them, up to a couple of hundred. Depends on which way you want to go. There's another thing that we didn't touch on. There's a guy in Vermont that doesn't feed them corn and grounds feed. He actually gets given free wood chips, and he mixes in manure, and he let it compost, and then he moves his chickens to the different compost heaps
with worm casing. Yes.
And he just let the chickens dig through and find the worms. Which I haven't got to that experiment yet. We have the manure because we have 20 horses, and and we have the freak wood chips.
There it is. You're set to be in outer space. You can, with your system right now, you could go to space. You don't need a neighbor.
Okay, so, J.C., you haven't been to the farm here, but Rick has. And what we decided to do, because we had a drought, we needed to maximize the grass, the use of our grass. And so we have cows with electric fence tape right up to the house. I can look out the studio window and, if I could reach through the glass, I could rub the cows' noses. I mean, that's how close they are. Literally, they are right against the farmhouse. And what we do is we let the chickens out, and the chickens know that we have cows in the front yard and the side yard. So what they do is, as soon as the cows poop, they race out there and they go digging through it. Literally, maybe a couple hours later, but they go digging through the cow poop and they spread it all around. They take one pile and they make it go, probably 3 square feet. And the reason they do that is they're looking for bugs. And they know that dung beetles, D-U-N-G beetles, just pop out of cow poop. So they're a little early on in the game, and they should wait a couple days, and they'd have more to eat. But they spread the manure, the cow manure, for us, so we don't have to spread it. It's a great relationship with the chickens and the cows and the dogs. The dogs protect the chickens. The chickens make the eggs for the dogs to eat, and the chickens spread the cow manure, and they eat the bugs that drive the cows crazy. So, I mean, it's a wonderful relationship, and then we get the side benefits of having chickens and eggs. So, class, I think today's broadcast is something you ought to take to heart. It absolutely works independently, J.C. Rick and I have done this.